It was a gray, drizzling evening in late October when my life tilted off its axis. I was 32, standing in the dim glow of my childhood home, a weathered, two-story building with a neon sign flickering Harrington's Diner above the entrance. The air smelled of salt and rain, carried inland from the restless waves crashing against the cliffs of Port Haven, a sleepy coastal town clinging to its charm in northern Oregon. Inside, the diner was quiet, save for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional clink of a spoon against a mug. My parents sat at a corner booth, surrounded by a chaos of unpaid bills, their faces carved with exhaustion. I'd driven 3 hours from Portland, where I'd built a life as a rising star in digital marketing, to answer their cryptic call. "We need you here, Elise. It's urgent." Harrington's had been the heartbeat of our family since 1952, when my great-grandmother, Clara Harrington, opened it with little more than a battered stove, a stubborn will, and a biscuit recipe so good it drew fishermen from miles around. My mother, Margaret, had turned it into a local legend during the 80s and 90s. Sure, warm laugh and knack for remembering every regular's order made it more than just a place to eat. My father, Tom, kept the books and fixed the leaks, a quiet man whose love showed in the way he polished the counter until it gleamed. I grew up in that diner, flipping burgers after school, sneaking fries from the kitchen, dreaming of a life beyond the grease-stained aprons and endless coffee refills. By 32, I'd made it marketing director for a sleek, upscale chain of cafes called Brew & Bloom, with a corner office, a wardrobe of tailored blazers, and a future that felt like mine. But that night, as rain streaked the diner's windows, my parents looked at me with something I hadn't seen before: defeat. "We're sinking, Elise," Dad said, his voice a low rasp, barely audible over the storm outside. The downturn in 2020 hit us hard. Then the supply costs skyrocketed, the chains moved in down the road, and that fire last year. He trailed off, rubbing his temples. Mom reached across the table, her hand finding mine, her fingers cold but steady. "We're a month from closing, maybe less. Unless someone steps in." I knew what they meant before they said it. My younger brother, Nate, was off gallivanting through Southeast Asia last I'd heard. He was surfing in Thailand, sporting a sunburn and a lotus tattoo he'd gotten on a whim. He hadn't set foot in Harrington since he was 19, when he'd declared small-town life suffocating and bolted. It wasn't Nate they were asking. It was me. "I've got a life in Portland," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "A career. I can't just—" "We're not asking you to throw it away," Dad cut in, his eyes pleading. "Help us get back on our feet, and it's yours, Elise. Full ownership. We'll sign the papers once the diner's stable again. You have our word." That word promise hung in the air like a lifeline. I looked at Mom, her face lined with years of late nights and early mornings, then at Dad, his shoulders slumped under the weight of a legacy he couldn't carry alone. I thought of Clara, frying biscuits in the dark before dawn, and all the Harringtons who'd kept this place alive. My life in Portland was shiny and fast, but this was roots. This was family. "Okay," I said, the word tasting like surrender and resolve all at once. "I'll do it." Quitting Brew & Bloom was like amputating a limb. My boss, a wiry woman named Claire with a penchant for power suits, stared at me across her glass desk, incredulous. "You're leaving a six-figure gig for a greasy spoon in where? Port Haven? Elise, you're on track for VP in 2 years." I smiled tightly, muttered something about family duty, and walked out before I could second-guess myself. By the next week, I'd sublet my sleek downtown apartment, packed my life into a rented U-Haul, and moved into the cramped loft above Harrington's, where the ceiling slanted so low I had to duck to avoid the beams. The diner was worse than I'd imagined. The fire had left scorch marks on the back wall, the grill was on its last legs, and the books were a tangle of red ink and desperation. My first morning I woke at 4 a.m. to a leaking pipe, a supplier screaming about an overdue payment, and a breakfast rush that nearly broke me. I burned the hash browns, spilled coffee down my shirt, and smiled through gritted teeth as regulars grumbled about the new girl, who didn't know her way around. But I learned. I scrubbed grease off the floors, haggled with vendors, and stayed up past midnight redesigning the menu, swapping out tired staples for fresh, locally sourced dishes like crab benedict and lavender honey pancakes. I launched a website, set up online ordering, and flooded Instagram with photos of the diner's revival. Golden fries, steaming mugs, the view of the cliffs at sunrise. Slowly it worked. The locals came back, drawn by the new energy and the promise of something familiar made better. Tourists trickled in, lured by a feature in coastal living that called Harrington's, the heart of Port Haven's resurgence. By the third year we were breaking even. By the fourth we turned a profit, real tangible growth. I'll never forget the morning I printed the balance sheet, the numbers black and bold, and whispered to myself, "We did it." Dad clapped me on the shoulder, his smile faint but proud. "You brought us back, Elise," he said. Mom pulled me into a hug, her voice thick. "We couldn't have done it without you." I believed them. I believed in the promise. The celebration came a week later, a crisp November evening with the diner packed to the rafters. Loyal customers toasted with cider, the staff laughed over plates of pie, and even Nate showed up, tan and scruffy, a woven bracelet dangling from his wrist. He'd been back in Port Haven for a month, crashing at Mom and Dad's place, talking vaguely about finding his purpose. I didn't mind, was my little brother, the charming screw-up who'd always coasted on his grin and good intentions. I figured he'd hang around, maybe pitch in, then drift off again. That's just who Nate was. After the last guest left, my parents called us into the back office, see a cramped room with peeling paint and a desk buried under paperwork. "We've got something to say," Mom began, her tone bright, almost giddy. My stomach fluttered with anticipation. This was the moment they'd make good on their word. "Your father and I have decided," she said, beaming at Nate, "that Harrington's will go to Nate." The words didn't register at first. I blinked, laughing a short, disbelieving bark. "What?" Dad shifted, his voice gentle but firm. "You've done so much, Elise. More than we could have asked. But Nate's the son. It's how it's always been, father to son. Tradition." The floor dropped out from under me. I stared at them, waiting for the punchline, but their faces stayed serious, resolute. Nate fidgeted, avoiding my gaze. "I gave you 4 years," I said, my voice trembling. "I left my career, my life. You promised me." "Don't make this a fight, Elise," Mom said, her tone sharpening. "You'll always have a role here. Your family." "A role?" I spat. "Like some hired hand? I rebuilt this place." "Me? We never meant to mislead you," Dad said, but his eyes wouldn't meet mine. "We just thought you'd understand." I turned to Nate. "And you? You're okay with this?" He shrugged, hands in his pockets. "I didn't ask for it, Lise. They just decided." "Did you tell them no?" I pressed. "Did you say, 'Hey, Elise earned this, not me'?" He looked away, and that silence was louder than anything he could have said. I walked out, the cold air hitting me like a slap. For days I stayed in the loft, staring at the ceiling, replaying every sacrifice, the 4 a.m. mornings, the sleepless nights, the dreams I'd shelved. Then I found it. A folder on my laptop labeled Harrington's Revival. Inside were spreadsheets, marketing plans, emails from Dad saying, "You're the future of this place," and a text from Mom. "Can't wait to see your name on the deed." Proof they'd dangled a promise they never intended to keep. I called a lawyer the next week. Her name was Dana Pierce, a sharp-eyed woman with a reputation for taking on messy family disputes. She met me at a coffee shop in Portland, her notepad open, her expression calm as I poured out the story. "Did they ever put it in writing?" she asked. "Not a contract," I said, my heart pounding. "But I've got emails, texts, voicemails. Enough to show they meant it." Dana leaned back, tapping her pen. "Promissory estoppel, maybe fraud if we can prove intent. It's not airtight, but it's solid. The question is, Elise, are you ready to sue your own parents?" I hesitated. The word family clawed at me, all the memories of Mom teaching me to knead dough, Dad fixing my bike in the parking lot. But then I thought of Nate behind the counter wearing my apron, smirking like he'd earned it. "Yes," I said. "I'm ready." We built the case brick by brick. Dana combed through every email, every text, every scrap of evidence. There was a voicemail from Dad, his voice warm and certain. "Once we're back on our feet, Elise takes over. Officially." There was an email from Mom titled Ownership Draft for Review, with a half-finished document she'd never followed through on. I'd been the backbone of the diner managing staff, negotiating with suppliers, pulling it from the brink, yet they'd kept me in limbo. No title, no stake, just a vague someday they never planned to deliver. The lawsuit hit like a thunderclap. My parents didn't call. No apologies, no explanations, just a letter from their lawyer. A slick downtown firm with a reputation for bulldozing smaller cases. It claimed I'd been compensated by living rent-free in the loft, that my work was familial support, not a job tied to ownership. I laughed bitterly when I read it. Rent-free? I'd paid utilities, bought equipment, even covered payroll out of my savings when cash was tight. They weren't just denying the promise, they were rewriting history. Nate stayed silent, but I saw him once, lounging at the diner like a king in a borrowed crown. "Hey Lise," he said, casual as ever. "You good?" "Just picking up my stuff," I replied, shoving recipe notes and a spare jacket into a box. He leaned back, grinning. "Wild how it all worked out, huh? Mom and Dad said it was always the plan, me taking over eventually." I froze. "You think you earned this?" "I mean, you did the grunt work, sure," he said, shrugging. "But I've got big ideas. I'll make it huge." I walked out before I could say something I'd regret. That was the moment I stopped doubting myself. This wasn't about hurt feelings, it was about justice. The hearing came 6 months later. A sterile courtroom in Portland with fluorescent lights and a judge who looked like she'd seen every family drama imaginable. I wore a navy blazer, my hands steady despite the nerves clawing at my chest. My parents sat across the room, Mom in a gray sweater, Dad in a suit that didn't quite fit anymore. Nate wasn't there, he'd dodged every court date, leaving them to fight his battle. Dana laid it out like a surgeon, calm, precise, lethal. She presented the emails, the voicemails, the financial records showing how I'd turned the diner around. "My client wasn't a bystander," she said, her voice cutting through the room. "She was the architect of Harrington's survival. And she did it because her parents promised her ownership, a promise they repeated in writing, over years, until the moment it suited them to break it." Their lawyer, a polished man named Grayson with a $500 haircut, spun a different story. "Elise Harrington acted out of love, not obligation," he said smoothly. "There was no contract, just a family understanding. She lived rent-free, benefited from the business." "Rent-free," Dana interjected, sliding a stack of receipts across the table. "She paid utilities, bought equipment, worked 80-hour weeks without a salary. That's not a perk, that's exploitation." The judge, a woman with steel gray hair and a no-nonsense stare, leaned forward. "Mr. Harrington," she said, fixing Dad with a look, "why did you tell your daughter ownership was coming if you never intended to follow through?" Dad shifted, his voice low. We meant it at the time. But Nate's the son. It's tradition. We didn't think she'd take it this far." The judge's eyebrow arched. "So you assumed she'd accept being sidelined?" He didn't answer. Mom dabbed her eyes, but I couldn't tell if it was guilt or theater. Grayson jumped in, arguing the promise wasn't binding, that family matters didn't belong in court. But the judge wasn't swayed. "If it's not binding," she said, "why did she abandon her career? Why did she pour 4 years into your business? You don't get to call it family when it's convenient and volunteer work when it's not." It wasn't a win, not yet, but the air shifted. My parents looked smaller, their certainty fraying. Outside, the story spread. The Port Haven Tribune ran a piece. "Diner lawsuit exposes small-town sexism." Customers started whispering, some avoided the diner. Others left notes for me at the post office. "You're the real Harrington." My Aunt Lila, Dad's older sister, called me late one night. "I didn't know Elise," she said, her voice thick. "I'm ashamed of them. If you need me, I'm here." The mediation came a month later, a last-ditch effort before trial. We met in a conference room with a view of the river. The mediator, a soft-spoken woman named Ellen who radiated quiet authority. My parents arrived late, Dad's face drawn, Mom clutching a purse like a shield. Nate didn't show again. Dana presented the evidence, a damning timeline of promises and betrayal. Their lawyer countered, but his arguments felt thinner, rehearsed. Ellen turned to Dad. "What was your understanding when Elise came back?" He hesitated, then sighed. "We told her she'd get the diner. We just didn't think she'd fight us on it." The room went still. Mom whispered, "It was tradition. We didn't mean to hurt her." "Tradition," I said, my voice steady but sharp. "You mean sons inheriting what daughters bleed for?" That's not tradition, it's theft. No one answered. Ellen steered us toward a deal. I didn't want a payout or platitudes, I wanted what I'd earned. After an hour of tense back and forth, they folded. 51% ownership to me, 49% to Nate, effective in 30 days.
Ide control finances, branding, operatiun sabaiting.
It wasn't a gift. It was justice. As we left, Dad tried to speak. Elise. I raised a hand. We all made choices. Let's live with them. 30 days later, the papers were signed. Walking into Harrington's as majority owner felt surreal. The weight of it settling into my bones. The staff greeted me warily, unsure if I'd swing an axe. I didn't. I told them we'd build something better together. Nate showed up, sulky but present, and I let him stay. Not out of kindness, but because real change comes from moving forward, not burning bridges. The first morning I stood behind the counter, watching the sunrise paint the cliffs gold. A regular old Mr. Dawson shuffled in and tipped his hat. Heard what you did, Elise. Takes guts. Claire'd be proud. I smiled, pouring his coffee. Thanks. She would, wouldn't she? That night, alone in the loft, I opened my laptop and started typing not a lawsuit, but a story. My story. About promises broken and reclaimed. About fighting for what you're worth. About a diner that almost died and the woman who wouldn't let it. I posted it online, raw and unpolished, and watched it spread, comments rolling in from strangers who'd been overlooked, underestimated, betrayed. You gave me courage, one wrote. Keep telling the truth, said another. I didn't start this for applause. I started it because I had to. But if my voice can light a spark for someone else, then every sleepless night, every tear, every battle was worth it. Harrington's isn't just a diner, Anna Marie, it's a testament. And I'm not done building. Not by a long shot.
If you were the one in this story, how would you react? Would you stand up and fight back, or accept the unreasonable pressure and control from the HOA? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video with more people. Your small action gives us the motivation to keep bringing you more intense and engaging stories. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.